Captain Jake Martinez stared at the screen in disbelief. The message had arrived 3 minutes ago, transmitted from somewhere beyond the outer planets. It was not the friendly greeting that Earth scientists had always hoped for when they dreamed. A first contact with alien life. Attention, primitive species of the third planet. The mechanical voice continued its cold translation. You have been selected for integration into the Zephyrian hegemony. Surrender is mandatory. Resistance will result in complete sterilization of your world. Jake ran his hand through his dark hair and looked around the command center of the Earth. Defense station. The other officers stood frozen, their faces pale with shock. Nobody had expected this. For 50 years, humanity had been sending radio signals into space, hoping to find friendly neighbors among the stars. Instead, they had found masters who demanded submission. Admiral Lisa Crawford walked into the command center just as the message finished playing. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Lisa had spent 30 years preparing Earth's defenses against possible alien threats, but even she had not imagined something like this. "Play it again," she ordered. The alien voice filled the room once more. It spoke in perfect English, which meant these beings had been watching Earth for some time. They knew about human languages, human technology, and probably human weaknesses. "2. How many ships?" Lisa asked the sensor operator. 12 contacts, Admiral A, appeared suddenly at the edge of our solar system 2 hours ago. Each one is roughly the size of a city block. Lisa felt her stomach drop. Earth's largest military vessels were barely a tenth that size. She walked to the main display screen and studied the tactical readout. The alien ships held perfect formation, spaced evenly around the solar system like points on a compass. It was a classic blockade pattern designed to prevent any escape. "Get me President Kane," she ordered. Within minutes, the president's face appeared on the screen. Liam Kane was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He had been elected to lead during peacetime, not to face the possible extinction of the human race. "Admiral Crawford, I assume you've received the same message we have here in Washington?" "Yes, sir. We've also detected 12 large alien vessels positioned around our solar system. They're not here for a friendly chat." The president nodded grimly. "What are our options?" Lisa looked at the data streaming across her screens. Earth's entire space force consisted of 47 ships, most of them designed for asteroid mining or scientific research. Only 12 were actual military vessels, and those were built to fight other humans, not aliens with technology centuries. Ahead of their own? Honestly, sir, we have 3 choices. We can surrender immediately. We can try to negotiate, or we can fight. And if we fight, based on the size of those ships, they could probably destroy every major city on Earth within hours. But if we surrender, Lisa paused, thinking about the message. They called us a primitive species and talked about integration. That doesn't sound like they plan to treat us as equals. President Kane was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Lisa could hear the sounds of urgent conversations and ringing phones. The entire government was probably in emergency session by now. "How long do we have?" the president asked. The message said we have 72 hours to respond. After that, they began what they called pacification protocols. Jake Martinez had been listening to the conversation while monitoring the alien ships. Suddenly, his screen lit up with new information. "Admiral, we're receiving a data transmission. From one of the alien vessels, it looks like. Historical records." Lisa turned to study Jake's screen. Streams of images and texts were flowing across the display, all translated into English. The images showed worlds burning, cities in ruins, and crowds of alien beings kneeling before tall reptilian creatures. "They're showing us what happens to worlds that resist," Jake said quietly. The images were horrifying. Planet after planet reduced to smoking ruins. Entire civilizations wiped out in days. The reptilian aliens, who called themselves Zephyrians, stood victorious over the ashes of 100 different species. But then, the data stream showed something else. Images of worlds that had surrendered quickly, their populations alive, but clearly enslaved. Alien beings working in mines and factories, building ships and weapons for their Zephyrian masters. Children separated from parents, families broken apart, entire cultures erased. They're giving us a choice, Lisa said grimly. Die quickly or live as slaves. President Kane's face was grim when he spoke again. Admiral, I need you to prepare a full briefing for the Joint Chiefs and the Security Council. We meet in 2 hours. Yes, sir. The connection ended, leaving Lisa alone with her staff. She looked around the command center at the men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth. Most of them were young, bright officers who had joined the Space Force to explore the galaxy, not to fight for humanity's survival. Captain Martinez, I want you to send a message to every ship in the fleet. Emergency recall, all vessels to return to Earth immediately. Yes, ma'am. Oh. Lisa walked to the main viewing screen and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 12 alien warships waited for humanity's answer. Behind them, according to the historical records they had transmitted, lay an empire that controlled thousands of worlds and had never been defeated. The Zephyrian hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 800 years. They had crushed every rebellion, absorbed every civilization, and turned entire species into servants. Their message to Earth was not a negotiation or a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. Resistance was impossible. Surrender was mandatory. Jake Martinez finished sending the recall orders and turned to his admiral. And what do you think we should do? Lisa looked at the young captain. He was barely 30 years old, with a wife and 2 small children back on Earth. Like everyone else in the command center, he was looking to her for answers she didn't have. I think, she said slowly, that we're about to find out what humans are really made of. 2 hours later, Lisa sat in a conference room deep beneath the Pentagon. Around the table sat the most powerful people on Earth, President Kane, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the heads of major governments, representatives from every nation with space capabilities. General Nick Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was studying the alien data on his tablet. These Zephyrians have conquered over 3,000 worlds. They've never lost a major conflict. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. What about their tactics? Asked President Kane. Psychological warfare combined with overwhelming force, Lisa replied. They show up, demonstrate their power, and demand immediate surrender. Most species give up without a fight, and the ones that don't, complete annihilation. They don't take prisoners in battle, and they don't show mercy to military forces. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant for Earth's armed forces if they chose to resist. Dr. Maria Santos, Earth's leading expert on alien technology, spoke up from her seat at the far end of the table. I've been analyzing the technical data and their transmission. Their ships use some kind of energy shielding that our weapons probably can't penetrate. They also have weapons that can crack a planet's crust from orbit. So we can't win, said the president. It's not in a conventional sense, Lisa agreed. But maybe winning isn't the point. Everyone turned to look at her. These aliens have been conquering worlds for 8 centuries. They have a system that works. Show up, demand surrender, crush anyone who resists. But what if someone doesn't play by their rules? General Thompson leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Admiral? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time someone taught the galaxy that humans don't know how to quit. The debate that followed would determine the fate of not just humanity, but every enslaved species in the galaxy. The 72 hours passed like a nightmare. President Kane had made his decision after 18 hours of debate, but the alien ships had remained silent, waiting for humanity's official response. When the deadline arrived, Earth transmitted a single word across all frequencies: no. Colonel Ryan Davis was commanding the defense of Europa Station when the Zephyrian response came. The mining colony orbited Jupiter with 3,000 workers and their families, extracting ice and rare minerals from the frozen moon. It was supposed to be the safest assignment in the outer colonies. A contact bearing 27 mark for, reported Sergeant Kelly Brooks from the sensor station. Single vessel, massive energy signature. Ryan looked through the station's observation deck at the approaching ship. It was beautiful, in a terrifying way, smooth black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The vessel was easily 10 times larger than Europa Station, moving with the slow confidence of a predator that knew its prey could not escape. All civilians to the emergency shelters, Ryan ordered. Military personnel to battle stations. Station had 12 defensive turrets and a small garrison of 200 soldiers. Against the approaching alien warship, might as well have been armed with slingshots. The alien ship stopped just outside weapons range and transmitted a message. The same mechanical voice that had first contacted Earth now spoke to the doomed mining station. This facility will be destroyed as a demonstration of hegemony power. Evacuation pods will not be targeted if launched immediately. You have 5 minutes. Ryan felt his hand shake as he reached for the evacuation alarm. 3,000 people, including women and children, depended on his decision. Smart choice was obvious. Save who he could and let the aliens destroy the station. Instead, he activated the battle alert. All hands. This is Colonel Davis. The aliens have given us 5 minutes to abandon our home. I say we give them 5 minutes, they'll never forget. The response surprised him. Instead of panic or demands to evacuate, his communication system filled with volunteers. Civilian miners requested weapons assignments, maintenance workers asked, to help load the defense turrets. Even teenagers too young for military service begged to help fight. Sir called Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communications station. I'm picking up similar responses from stations throughout the system. Nobody's running. Ryan nodded grimly. Maybe humans were just too stupid to know when they were beaten. The alien ship opened fire exactly 5 minutes later. The first blast tore through Europa Station's outer ring, killing 50 people instantly. The second blast destroyed the main power grid, plunging half the station into darkness. But Europa Station was fired back. The mining colony's defensive turrets were designed to destroy asteroids, not alien warships. Their projectiles bounced harmlessly off the enemy's energy shields, but the miners had been creative. They loaded the turrets with everything they could find: metal debris, chunks of ice, even furniture and personal belongings. Most of it was useless against the alien shields, but some of the metal fragments were moving fast enough to cause small overloads in the energy barrier. Tiny flashes of light appeared where the projectiles struck, like sparks from a campfire. The alien ship's response was swift and brutal. A third energy blast tore Europa Station in half, exposing the intersections to the vacuum of space. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. But hundreds more people died in the decompression. Ryan found himself in the emergency command center, bleeding from a head wound and surrounded by smoke. Half his staff was dead or injured, but Lieutenant Amy Foster was still at her post, frantically working her communications equipment. "What's our status?" he asked. "Life support failing in sections 7 through 12. We've lost contact with the civilian shelters, but sir, you need to hear this." Amy played back an intercepted alien transmission. The mechanical translation was choppy, but the meaning was clear. The alien commander was reporting to his superiors, and he sounded confused. "Target continues to return fire despite hopeless tactical situation. Recommend immediate termination of remaining resistance." "Negative," came the reply from another alien voice. "Standard pacification protocol requires demonstration of futility. Continue until enemy ceases resistance." "Understood, but enemy behavior is outside normal parameters. They are not attempting to minimize casualties or preserve infrastructure." Ryan listened to the exchange with growing amazement. The aliens expected humans to fight like reasonable beings, trying to save lives and protect valuable resources. They didn't understand that humans could become unreasonable when facing extinction. "Amy, can you broadcast on all frequencies?" "Yes, sir, but the transmission won't be secure." "I don't care who hears this." Ryan activated the communication system and spoke to every human settlement in the solar system. "This is Colonel Ryan Davis at Europa Station. We're under attack by alien forces, and we are going to lose. But before we die, we want everyone to know something important. These aliens can be hurt. Their shields aren't perfect, and they bleed. Just like anything else," as if to prove his point. Another barrage from Europa Station managed to cause a visible flicker in the alien ship's energy barrier. It was a tiny victory, meaningless in tactical terms, but it proved the aliens weren't invincible. The alien ship fired again, and this time, Europa Station died. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief star that flared and faded in the darkness around Jupiter. But Ryan's message had been heard throughout the solar system, and something unprecedented began to happen. Instead of surrendering or fleeing, human settlements prepared to fight. General Nick Thompson coordinated Earth's response from the war room deep beneath Colorado. Reports poured in from across the solar system as Zephyrian ships moved to destroy military targets and population centers. The lunar colonies are under attack, reported Captain Alex Stone from the Moon's main defense center. 3 alien ships. In assault formation, Mars colony requests immediate reinforcement, came another voice. Single alien vessel demanding surrender. Asteroid belt miners are mobilizing, called out Major Diana Walsh from the communications station. They're using mining charges as weapons. Nick studied the tactical display with growing amazement. Across human space, the same pattern was repeating. Faced with overwhelming odds and certain death, humans were choosing to fight rather than surrender. The aliens seemed genuinely puzzled by this response. Their intercepted communications revealed growing frustration among Zephyrian commanders. Species exhibits abnormal resistance behavior, reported one alien captain. Minimal tactical value and continued resistance, yet enemy maintains aggressive posture. Perhaps they do not understand their situation, suggested another voice. Negative. Translation protocols confirmed accurate. Species understands consequences but continues irrational behavior. Dr. Maria Santos listened to these transmissions from her laboratory beneath the Pentagon. She had spent the last 3 days analyzing every piece of alien technology and communication Earth had intercepted. General Thompson, she called across the war room. I think I understand what's happening. Nick looked up from his tactical displays. What do you mean? The aliens have a rigid system for conquest. They show up, demonstrate superior power, and expect immediate surrender. It's worked for 800 years because every other species they've encountered has been rational. And humans aren't rational? Not when we're cornered? Every other species in the galaxy probably weighs the odds and makes logical decisions. But humans... ... double quotes. Maria paused, trying to find the right words. Humans get angry. As if to prove her point, reports began arriving of successful human attacks. Mining ship from the asteroid belt had rammed an alien vessel, causing significant damage before being destroyed. Lunar defenders had collapsed a tunnel system, trapping an alien landing party underground. Even civilian transports were joining the fight, using their cargo holds to deliver improvised weapons to besieged settlements. Aliens were winning every battle, but they were taking losses they had never experienced before. For the first time in 8 centuries, Zephyrian hegemony was bleeding. Commander Troy Williams led the last organized resistance in the outer system, commanding a mixed fleet of military vessels and converted civilian ships. His flagship was a cargo hauler armed with mining lasers and protected by improvised armor plating. Alien battle group approaching Mars, reported his sensor operator. 12 ships in standard attack formation. Troy looked at his own fleet. 37 ships of various sizes, most of them designed for hauling freight, rather than fighting wars. Against 12 alien warships, they didn't stand a chance. All ships, this is Williams. We're going to hit them fast and hard. Don't worry about formation or tactics. Just get close and hurt them however you can. The response from his captains was immediate and unanimous. Nobody suggested retreating or surrendering. Nobody pointed out that they were outnumbered and outgunned. Instead, they charged. The Battle of Mars lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of Troy's fleet. But when it was over, 3 alien ships had been destroyed and 4 more were damaged. News of the battle spread across the galaxy through channels humans didn't even know existed. For the first time in 8 centuries, someone had made the Zephyrian hegemon. The news traveled faster than light across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, in slave quarters and work camps, Beings who had forgotten the meaning of hope began to whisper about the impossible. Someone had hurt the Zephyrian hegemony. Someone had made them bleed. Supreme Marshal Vexter stood in the command center of his flagship, studying reports that should not have existed. The hegemony's conquest of the human homeworld should have been completed within days. Instead, his forces had been fighting for 3 weeks and were requesting additional battle groups. "Explain this to me again," he said to his intelligence officer, a thin reptilian creature whose scales had turned pale with stress. The humans continue to resist, despite suffering 90% casualties in every engagement. Their behavior does not match any known species profile in our database. Vexter's claws clicked against the metal railing as he considered this information. In 800 years of conquest, no species had ever inflicted significant losses on hegemony forces. The humans had destroyed 18 ships and damaged 43 others. It was unthinkable. "Perhaps they do not understand that resistance is futile," suggested another officer. "They understand," Vexter replied grimly. "They simply do not care." Truth was even more disturbing than his officers knew. Reports were arriving from across the galaxy of increasing unrest among the subject species. The Vorthok workers in the mining systems were staging slowdowns. The Kalini technicians were reporting mysterious equipment failures. Even the normally docile Soran agricultural workers were showing signs of defiance. Captain Alex Stone crouched in the ruins of Luna City, watching alien assault troops advance through the rubble. The underground fortress had been his home for 2 years. Carved into the moon's rock by human engineers who had planned for this day long before first contact. "Movement in Sector 7, whispered Sergeant Beth Parker through his earpiece. "Looks like a full squad of Zephyrian infantry." Alex smiled grimly. The aliens were learning that destroying human cities was only the first step. Occupying them was something else entirely. "Let them come," he replied. "We've got a warm welcome prepared." The lunar defenders had turned the moon into a nightmare for occupying forces. Every tunnel was trapped, every chamber could become a tomb, and the low gravity gave the humans advantages the aliens had not expected. A human could leap 10 feet in lunar gravity, while the heavily armored Zephyrians moved like slow, predictable targets. The alien squad entered the trapped corridor exactly as Alex had hoped. The shape charges he and his team had planted brought down tons of rock, sealing the passage and burying the enemy soldiers alive. "That's the 3rd squad today," reported Beth. "They're getting smarter about checking for traps." "Then we'll get smarter about hiding them," Alex replied. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Lisa Crawford coordinated a defense that defied every principle of military science. Her forces were outnumbered 100 to 1, outgunned by weapons they barely understood, and fighting an enemy with centuries of experience, yet somehow they were still fighting. Status report. She ordered as she entered the command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Captain Jake Martinez looked up from his displays, his face haggard from weeks without proper sleep. "The aliens have established orbital control over most major cities. Ground forces are advancing on all fronts, but we're making them pay for every mile." The tactical display showed a planet under siege. Red zones marked areas under alien control, while blue dots represented surviving human resistance cells. The pattern looked hopeless, except for one crucial detail that the Zephyrians were just beginning to understand. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not try to preserve their infrastructure or minimize casualties. When faced with extinction, they became something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that fought harder as defeat became more certain. Dr. Kevin Park had been studying captured alien soldiers for 2 weeks, trying to understand their psychology. What he discovered changed everything the humans thought they knew about their enemies. "Admiral Crawford," he called across the medical bay. "You need to see this." Lisa walked over to where Kevin was examining brain scans of Zephyrian prisoners. The images showed neural patterns unlike anything in human medical databases. "Their brains are structured for hierarchy and obedience," Kevin explained. "They're literally incapable of independent thought when separated from their command structure. It's been bred into them over thousands of years." "What does that mean?" "For us, it means they've never faced an enemy that thinks for itself. Every other species they've conquered probably had similar hierarchical thinking. When you cut off the head, the body dies. Lisa stared at the brain scans, understanding dawning in her eyes. But humans. Humans get more dangerous when you kill their leaders. We're the first species they've encountered that actually becomes stronger when our command structure breaks down. As if to prove his point, reports began arriving of successful human attacks across the globe. Resistant cells in Asia had destroyed an alien supply depot. European fighters had brought down 2 enemy aircraft using nothing but small arms and determination, even in occupied territories. Human civilians were making life impossible for Zephyrian garrison troops. Lieutenant Ellen Carter had been working in the diplomatic corps when the war began. Now she found herself in the most unlikely role of her career, secret ambassador to a galaxy in rebellion. The message had arrived through channels so hidden that most humans did not know they existed. Alien resistance groups throughout the hegemony were requesting contact with the species that had done the impossible. "This is incredible," she told General Nick Thompson as they studied the translated communications. "There are rebel movements on over 200 worlds. They're all asking the same question. How do humans keep fighting when they know they cannot win?" Nick looked at the star charts showing rebel activity across the galaxy. After 8 centuries of submission, the subject species were remembering what resistance meant. "What do we tell them?" he asked. Ellen smiled. "We tell them the truth. We tell them that winning isn't the point. The point is making sure the bastards know they've been in a fight." The Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. Supreme Marshal Vexter declared humanity a Class 5 extinction threat, and committed 3 full battle fleets to Earth's destruction. It was the largest military force ever assembled by the hegemony, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. But something unexpected happened as the massive fleets moved toward Earth. Rebel forces across the galaxy began coordinating attacks on hegemony supply lines and garrison forces. The Vorthok used their knowledge of mining systems to sabotage critical facilities. The Kalini turned their technical expertise against their master's equipment. Even the peaceful Soren began poisoning food supplies destined for Zephyrian forces. Commander Paul Richards watched the alien fleet approach Earth from his position on the lunar surface. 300 ships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. Humanity's remaining forces could not possibly stop them. "All units, this is Richards." He broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. "The big show is about to start. Let's make sure the galaxy remembers how humans say goodbye." The response came from across human space. From the asteroid belt, where miners had rigged every rock as a potential weapon. From Mars, where colonists had turned their dome cities into fortresses. From the outer planets, where research stations and shipping hubs prepared for their final battles, Dr. Maria Santos sat in her laboratory, putting the finishing touches on humanity's last desperate gambit. For weeks she had been analyzing captured alien technology, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. What she had found was both terrifying and hopeful. "Admiral," she called to Lisa Crawford, "I've figured out how their communication system works. Every ship in their fleet is connected through a quantum network that allows instant coordination across any distance. Can we disrupt it? Better than that, I think we can hijack it." Lisa stared at the technical readouts, hardly believing what she was seeing. We can access their entire communication network? Not just access it, we can broadcast on it. Every rebel group in the galaxy will be able to hear our transmissions. More importantly, they'll be able to coordinate their attacks. For the first time in weeks, Lisa smiled. Humanity might be about to die, but they would not die quietly. And their death scream would echo across every world in the galaxy. The siege of Earth was about to begin, but it would be unlike any siege. In galactic history, humans had turned their final battle into a broadcast, and every oppressed being in the galaxy would be watching supreme. Marshal Vexter studied the approaching blue-green world with satisfaction. Soon, the troublesome humans would be extinct, and the galaxy would return to its proper order. He had no way of knowing that the small planet below was about to teach the universe a lesson that would echo for centuries. Sometimes the loudest voice belongs to those who have nothing left to lose. The first broadcast went out as the Zephyrian fleet entered Earth's solar system. Dr. Maria Santos had successfully hijacked their quantum communication network. And suddenly, every rebel group in the galaxy could hear Admiral Lisa Crawford's voice. This is Admiral Lisa Crawford of the Earth Defense Force, speaking to all free beings in the galaxy. We are about to be destroyed by the Zephyrian hegemony. But before we die, we want you to know something important. You are not alone. Resistance is possible. And today, we're going to show you how. The message reached rebel cells on over 300 worlds simultaneously. For the first time in 8 centuries, the oppressed species of the galaxy had a coordinated communication system that their masters could not control. Admiral Grace Bennett commanded what remained of humanity's space fleet from a converted asteroid deep in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. Her force consisted of 43 ships of various sizes, most of them damaged from previous battles, against 300 Zephyrian warships. It should have been a hopeless last stand, but Grace was not planning to fight a conventional battle. All ships. This is Bennett. Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to teach. Every move we make is being broadcast to rebel forces across the galaxy. Make it count. The human fleet scattered as the aliens approached, breaking into small groups that attacked from unexpected directions. They used tactics that the Zephyrians had never encountered: ramming attacks, suicide runs, and coordinated strikes by civilian vessels that should not have been able to hurt military targets. Captain Diana Walsh led one of these impossible attacks, commanding a mining ship loaded with industrial explosives. Her target was a Zephyrian command vessel. Its massive bulk protected by energy shields that could deflect any conventional weapon. This is Walsh to all rebel forces, she broadcast as her ship accelerated toward the enemy. Pay attention to this next part. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles. They're not designed to stop a ship moving at full speed. Diana's mining vessel struck the alien command ship at nearly 200 miles per hour. The explosion was visible from Earth, and when the light faded, the massive Zephyrian vessel was drifting dead in space across the galaxy. Rebel groups took note. Within hours, similar ramming attacks were being reported on dozens of worlds. The hegemony's technological advantage meant nothing if the enemy was willing to die to hurt them. Commander Paul Richards defended the lunar fortresses with a mixture of creativity and desperation that amazed even his own troops. The aliens had landed 3 full divisions on the moon's surface, expecting to crush the remaining human resistance within days. Instead, they found themselves fighting in a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers where their superior weapons were useless. Human defenders used the low gravity to bounce off walls and ceilings, appearing from impossible angles to attack with improvised weapons before vanishing into hidden passages. Engineering to all units called Chief Eddie Torres over the communication system. We've rigged the main reactor to overload. When the aliens get close enough, we can take out their entire landing force. Paul considered the implications. Destroying the reactor would kill every human defender on Luna, but it would also eliminate thousands of enemy troops. Do it, he ordered, and make sure the galaxy hears our goodbye. The explosion that destroyed Luna Base was broadcast live to rebel forces throughout the galaxy. The message was clear: humans would rather die than surrender, and they would take as many enemies with them as possible. The psychological effect on the hegemony forces was devastating. For 8 centuries, they had conquered species that fought rationally, trying to minimize casualties and preserve their civilizations. Humans fought like madmen, becoming more dangerous as their situation grew more hopeless. Dr. Sam Turner had been studying alien psychology since the war began, and his research was finally bearing fruit. Working from a hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of Chicago, he made a discovery that changed everything. Admiral Crawford, he called over the emergency communication system. I've figured out why our tactics are so effective against them. Lisa looked up from the tactical displays showing Earth's final defense. Half the planet was already under alien control, but somehow the humans were still fighting. Tell me something good, Sam. Zephyrians have been bred for conquest over thousands of years. Their entire society is based on the idea that superior force guarantees victory. They've never faced an enemy that gets stronger when losing. And what? Do you mean? Yeah. Every other species they've conquered probably tried to preserve their population and infrastructure. When defeat became certain, they surrendered to save what they could. But humans. Sam paused, looking at data from battlefields across the planet. Humans fight harder when they're losing. We're literally the first species in galactic history that becomes more dangerous as we approach extinction, as if to prove. His point, reports began arriving of human counterattacks in areas that should have been completely under alien control. Civilian resistance groups were emerging from hiding to attack Zephyrian supply lines. Wounded soldiers were rigging themselves as walking bombs. Even children were finding ways to sabotage enemy equipment. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand. Every tactical manual in their database assumed that overwhelming force would lead to surrender. Against humans, overwhelming force led to increasingly desperate and effective resistance. Lieutenant Amy Foster had survived the destruction of Europa Station and now served as the primary communications officer for the resistance. Her job was to coordinate the broadcast of human tactics to rebel groups across the galaxy, and the response was beyond anything she had imagined. "Admiral, we're receiving confirmations from rebel forces on over 400 worlds. They're using our tactics with incredible success." Lisa studied the incoming reports with amazement. The Vorthok had begun using mining equipment as weapons, just like the humans in the asteroid belt. The Kalini were sabotaging critical systems using techniques broadcast by human engineers. Even the peaceful Soren were adopting guerrilla tactics. They had learned by watching Earth's broadcasts, calling it the human protocol. Amy continued. Rebel forces across the galaxy are abandoning conventional military thinking and adopting our approach. Make the enemy pay for every victory. The effect on the hegemony was catastrophic. Supreme Marshal Vexler found himself fighting rebellions on hundreds of worlds simultaneously, all using tactics his forces had never encountered. His military doctrine, perfected over 8 centuries, was useless against enemies who fought like humans. Captain Laura Mitchell commanded the defense of the Yellowstone complex, where Earth's government had relocated after Washington was destroyed. The underground facility was humanity's last major stronghold, protected by layers of rock and defended by the remains of Earth's military. "Alien forces approaching from the north," reported her sensor operator. "Looks like their final push." Laura nodded grimly. Intelligence suggested the aliens were committing their reserves to this attack. If Yellowstone fell, organized human resistance would be finished. "All units, this is Mitchell. This is our last dance, people. Let's make sure the galaxy remembers how it ends." The battle for Yellowstone was broadcast live to every rebel group in the galaxy. Human defenders fought with a ferocity that shocked even their allies. When ammunition ran out, they used improvised weapons. When weapons failed, they fought with their bare hands. When the bunkers were overrun, they triggered explosive charges that buried attackers and defenders alike. But something unexpected happened as the humans made their final stand. Reports began arriving of hegemony forces retreating on other worlds. The rigid Zephyrian command structure was beginning to crack under the pressure of fighting an enemy that would not behave rationally. Dr. Kevin Rocky Park made his final discovery. As alien troops breached the laboratory levels beneath Yellowstone, his research into Zephyrian psychology had revealed their ultimate weakness. They were psychologically incapable of understanding an enemy that chose death over surrender. "Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation," he broadcast to the galaxy as explosion echoed through the corridors outside. "They win by making enemies afraid to fight. But you can't intimidate someone who's already accepted death." The message reached rebel commanders across the galaxy just as they were planning their own desperate attacks. The revelation that the hegemony's strength was also its weakness spread like wildfire through the resistance networks. On the bridge of his flagship, Supreme Marshal Vexler stared at reports that made no sense. His forces were winning every battle against the humans, but they were losing the war. The species he was trying to exterminate had somehow infected the entire galaxy with their suicidal brand of resistance. For the first time in 8 centuries, The Zephyrian hegemony was facing the possibility of defeat, not because they lacked firepower or technology, but because they had finally met an enemy that refused to acknowledge the rules of civilized warfare. The humans had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the willingness to die fighting. And that lesson was about to bring down an empire that had ruled for 800 years. As Earth burned and humanity died, their final gift? 2 years after humanity first said no to the Zephyrian hegemony, Admiral Dan Brooks stood on the bridge of the newly constructed starship, Freedom's Dawn. The massive vessel was built from a mixture of captured alien technology and human engineering, floating in orbit around the former hegemony capital world of Zephyros Prime. Below them, along the once mighty planet, showed signs of the revolution that had swept across the galaxy. The towering spires that had symbolized 8 centuries of domination were now broken and dark. The orbital defense platforms that had protected the hegemony's heart were scattered debris. Signal from the surface, Admiral, reported communications. Officer Jenny Price, Supreme Marshal Vexter is ready to formally surrender. Dan nodded slowly. It was hard to believe the war was finally over. Humanity had paid a terrible price for their victory. Earth was in ruins, with less than 1 billion. Survivors scattered across refugee camps on Mars and the outer colonies, but their sacrifice had freed an entire galaxy. Tell the Marshal we'll receive his surrender in 1 hour. And Jenny, to make sure every world in the galaxy can watch this. The ceremony took place in the same chamber where the hegemony had once received the submission of conquered worlds. Now the roles were reversed, with the proud Zephyrian leadership kneeling before representatives of the species they had tried to exterminate. Supreme Marshal Vexter was a shadow of his former self. The reptilian commander who had once commanded 300 worlds now looked old and broken. His scales had lost their color, and his eyes showed the defeat of someone whose entire worldview had collapsed. I formally surrender all hegemony. Forces to the Terran Alliance, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. We submit to your terms without condition. Dan accepted the surrender with dignity. But his words were meant for the galaxy that was watching, not just the broken alien commander before him. We accept your surrender, but we want to make something clear to everyone listening. Humanity did not fight this war to replace your tyranny with our own. We fought to prove that freedom is possible, and that even the mightiest empire can fall when people refuse to kneel. The broadcast reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. On planets where alien species had lived as slaves for centuries, crowds gathered to watch their oppressors formally admit defeat. Many wept openly, unable to believe that the nightmare that had defined their lives was finally over. General Kate Morrison oversaw the establishment of the Galactic Liberation Council. From the former hegemony capital, the massive conference hall that had once housed only Zephyrian officials now buzzed with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all working together to build something the galaxy had never seen, a voluntary alliance of free planets. The old system is dead, she announced to the assembled delegates. We're not here to create another empire. We're here to make sure that no single species can ever dominate the galaxy again. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had been enemies under hegemony rule now worked side by side. The Vorthok offered their mining expertise to help rebuild worlds damaged by the war. The Kalini shared their advanced technology, freely with anyone who needed it. Even former hegemony loyalists were welcomed, as long as they accepted the new principles of freedom and cooperation. President Oliver Hayes addressed the First Galactic Assembly from the rebuilt chambers on Earth. The planet was still scarred from the war, but green was returning to the continents. Humanity had proven to be as dedicated to rebuilding as they had been to fighting. 2 years ago, we were told that resistance was futile, he said to the thousands of delegates from across the galaxy. We were told to surrender or die. We chose a third option. We chose to fight for something bigger than ourselves. The human president's words were translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. His message was simple but revolutionary. Freedom was not a privilege to be granted by the powerful, but a right to be claimed by the brave. Today, we establish not a new empire, but a new principle. Any world, any species, any being that chooses. Freedom will find friends and allies ready to help them defend it. The age of submission is over. The age of choice has begun. Captain Laura Mitchell commanded humanity's first deep space exploration vessel as it traveled to the far reaches of the galaxy. Her mission was to contact isolated worlds and offer them membership in the growing alliance.
What?
She found amazed. Even her seasoned crew. On world after world, local populations had already overthrown their hegemony governors. The human protocol had spread far beyond the organized rebellion, inspiring countless small revolutions across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Earth had adopted human tactics and won their own freedom. It's incredible, she reported back to Earth. We're finding free worlds and sectors that were supposedly under complete hegemony control. The revolution spread faster than we thought possible. Dr. Maria Santos, now director of the Galactic Technology Sharing Initiative, worked with alien scientists to distribute the advanced knowledge that had once been hoarded by the hegemony. Medical technologies, agricultural techniques, and industrial processes that could improve billions of lives were now freely available to anyone who wanted them. The hegemony's greatest crime wasn't conquest, she explained to a gathering of researchers from across the galaxy.
It was waste.
They had technologies that could have ended hunger, disease, and poverty on every world they controlled.
Instead,
they used that knowledge as a tool of control. The changes went deeper than politics or technology. The galaxy itself was becoming a different place. Trade routes that had been restricted to hegemony-approved cargo now carried goods and ideas. Between any worlds that chose to participate, art, music, and literature from hundreds of cultures began to spread freely, creating a renaissance of creativity that the rigid hegemony had never allowed. Commander Troy Williams, who had survived the Battle of Mars despite all odds, now led the joint military forces that protected the new alliance. His fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, ships from dozens of species working together, sharing tactics and technologies that had once been jealously guarded secrets. The old hegemony ruled through fear, he explained to a group of new recruits from various worlds. We protect through cooperation. Every species brings something unique to our defense. The Vorthok, no mining and explosives. The Kalini understand advanced technology. The Soren are masters of supply and logistics, and humans. He smiled grimly. Humans know how to fight when everything seems hopeless. The transformation was most visible on the former hegemony worlds themselves. Zephyros Prime, once the feared center of galactic tyranny, was now a bustling hub of interspecies cooperation. Former slave quarters had been converted into universities. Military factories now produced tools for building instead of weapons, for conquest. Even the Zephyrians themselves were changing. Freed from the rigid hierarchy that had defined their species for millennia, many began to explore concepts like individuality and creative thinking. It was a painful process for beings bred for obedience, but some were beginning to discover what they might become when given the choice. Lieutenant Amy Foster, now Director of Galactic Communications, maintained the quantum network that had once served the hegemony's military. But instead of carrying orders from masters to slaves, it now carried messages of friendship and cooperation between free worlds. We receive over 1 million communications every day, she reported to the Galactic Council. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and simple messages between friends on different worlds. The galaxy is talking to itself for the first time in 8 centuries. As the 3rd anniversary of humanity's first contact approached, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Earth to commemorate the moment that had changed everything. The ceremony took place at the memorial built where Europa Station had once orbited Jupiter, honoring Colonel Ryan Davis and the 3,000 souls who had been the first to show the galaxy that resistance was possible. Admiral Lisa Crawford, now elderly but still sharp, spoke to the assembled crowd about the price of freedom and the responsibility that came with it. We didn't fight this war to become heroes, she said simply. We fought because we didn't know how to do anything else. But what we learned and what we taught the galaxy is that the choice to be free is always available. You just have to be willing to pay the price. The galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the hegemony was not perfect. Still injustices, still worlds that chose isolation over cooperation. But it was a galaxy where choice existed, where freedom was possible, and where no single power could ever again dominate billions of lives. The small blue planet whose inhabitants had refused to kneel continued to send exploration ships into the unknown regions of space, not as conquerors, but as friends, to any who chose freedom over submission. The humans had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is not defeating your enemies, but inspiring them to become something better. And in the darkness between the stars, where new civilizations waited to be discovered, the message continued to spread. Resistance is never futile, hope is never lost, and freedom is always worth fighting for.